Am I going to have a worldly impact? Probably not. But if I can impact one family by preventing narcotics to getting to them, I feel like that's what keeps me motivated.
All right, I'm in Chicago, Illinois. A little bit of a different scenery than what I'm typically reporting on, but there's a big connection, and that is that there are major highways here in Illinois and Indiana that are being used for drug trafficking that directly is connected to the cartels, which are now considered terrorist organizations. So in today's episode of Borderland Dispatches with yours truly, I'm going to take you on a ride along with the very people who are working, Kenny, a police officer, who is working to combat transnational drug trafficking happening right here in the United States of America.
I am in Indiana. We're covering American crime, everyone, because as we know, the cartels, organized crime groups go international. They're transnational organized crime groups. So I'm here with Kenny, where his job is to literally get people for drug trafficking, right?
Yeah, trafficking, contraband.
So explain to me, like, what's a day in your life besides, like, giving people speeding tickets and beating them up?
I do none of that. But my objective of my job is simply to intercept people on our roadways that are traveling from point A to point B with contraband. I mean, if you look at the drug game or any contraband, no matter where it comes from, at some point it's going to have to touch a roadway. Even if you live in this country and you get it mailed to you, the user has to come to your house or you have to go deliver it. At some point it's going to touch some roadway.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where interdiction guys or girls are hopeful to intercept them.
You and I have chatted. I've been on Kenny's podcast. Do you want to give a shout out to your podcast?
Beyond the Barrel podcast?
Beyond the Barrel. I was on that podcast. As you guys know, I typically associate with criminals. So
I am not one.
I am with today the person who gets criminals, and in a day in your life, like, or over the course of your career, do you want to tell me a little bit about, like, what you've seen and who you've caught in terms of, like, particularly organized crime and drug trafficking?
So, like, as the evolution of interdiction started, I started in 2012 on a part-time assignment, and there was a lot more of the black market marijuana. And then as time has evolved, we would see certain, like, peaks of hard drugs like cocaine or heroin, but, like, the majority of the stuff that we see right now is a lot of fentanyl-based stuff and meth. Those are probably the two most common that we see on a regular basis.
And we're gonna go to Gary, Indiana today. So is there? I've heard there's, like, a crisis there.
There's been a crisis in Gary for a long time, and I don't know what the answer is. It's just kind of like that Rust Belt city that was prosperous in the 60s and 70s, and ever since then, like, when industries started leaving, it just created this vacuum. At one point, I think Gary had 200,000 to 300,000 people, and the population now is at 67,000 roughly thousand people. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Gary as a whole, the amount of abandoned buildings and all these other things is limited opportunities, I would say, for careers and those types of things. I think that's a good. It's horrible, but that where fosters, addiction and those types of environments.
So I wanted to cover, obviously, like, the crime aspect of this, and the gang members that I've reached out to and have been in contact with, they're pretty much all based in Gary. Why is that? Why is there, like, a
I don't know
perceived problem there? I guess.
Yeah, I don't because if you look at, like, those three cities, like Gary, Hammond, and East Chicago, those three cities all kind of had, like, the same thing, where there was mills and the, I don't know, I guess, like, the kind of part of that Rust Belt, but it seems like Gary suffered the most from when all those industries kind of went away or diminished dramatically, I guess, but Gary seems to, those other ones kind of, like, balance it out where they're not as bad. So I don't know if there's just, like, a vacuum there where these gangs then feel safer in Gary. I don't know. I honestly have no clue why maybe they're born and raised in Gary. I don't know. I don't know who you're talking to, so I don't really know.
Yeah, well, we're gonna find that out soon enough. But when you're looking at drug trafficking here, do you feel like that this is somewhat of like a highway into the rest of America? Because in my reporting, like I hear particularly Chicago is kind of like the spot where a lot of product, like Chicago, LA, New York, Atlanta, Houston, those are spots where like a lot of product is arriving to then be distributed throughout the United States.
Yeah, we've seen that over the years too, where Chicago is I don't know, if you look at, I try to use it like where people would understand. So if you take like a warehouse for Walmart, and then that warehouse is around the southwest border, and then you ship it out to stores where people have to buy it, that's kind of like the Chicago aspect of it, or something along those lines. And we've seen that over the years, and it's interesting because you'll see all these trends on a national average where, like, when I first started working in interdiction, people used to tell me, like, drugs go north, money goes south, like back into Mexico.
Yeah.
Not here. It's always been unique. You can't pick, because we'll see stuff from the southwest border, we'll see stuff from the west coast, but then we'll also drugs coming out this way, but then we'll also see people taking money from, say, Indianapolis to Chicago to pick up narcotics to go back to Indianapolis. So both ways on these highways around us, you're seeing, you can't pick which is money and which is drugs because of the hub that Chicago has became, or always been in my profession. Something has to happen, I think, and it has to start at the top. You have to have solid politicians that want to reinvest in the community and do the right thing. But as you can see, it's just rough. Like, you have blocks of just abandoned homes, blocks and blocks. I don't necessarily think it's the individuals in the city. I think it's, it's the lack of knowledge, the lack of seeing the right way to get out of this environment or to make it better.
Do you think about this a lot?
I do.
Does it bother you a lot?
It does, because I think that for me as a first responder, like, you only can do so much. So these are things that you think about, but then I just have to realize, like, I'm doing the best I can, and it's rewarding for me to just be the police, and maybe I'm not going to impact the entire world or even this whole community, but if I have a positive impact of one person not being able to get narcotics, and maybe that he doesn't overdose or she doesn't overdose, and maybe that's the I guess underlying that I look, and that's my motivation.
As a journalist, one of the biggest challenges I face is cutting through all the noise and bias to find out what really happened. Too often, the same story is reported in completely different ways depending on the outlet and the agenda behind it. That's why for today's episode, I partnered with Ground News. It's one of the best tools to cut through all the noise and find out what's really happening. Check out this article that I found. You can immediately see which outlets picked it up, how they framed it, and even which podcasts are covering it. If there's another topic you're tracking, whether that be cartels, border security, corruption, you can plug it right into the search bar and see the full spread of coverage. Subscribe to get 40% off of the Vantage plan by going directly to groundnews.com/ironclad or by clicking my link in the description. With their bias checker, you can see exactly where a news outlet leans, and with their blind spot feed, you can catch up on stories that may be underreported and that you may have missed. This organizes all of the coverage into one place so you can grasp the full story. It's not about telling you what to think, it's about helping you think critically with context.
You guys say the drug problem or the war on drugs exists because of the insatiable appetite and consumption of drugs in the US. So I'm here now on the other side after covering one side, Mexico and the cartels and the criminals responsible for this. But I'm here on the other side now to kind of show you guys how and why everything gets moved here in the United States in somewhat of a hotspot, a place that we read about on the news a lot, and exactly what it looks like for the very people like Kenny who are trying to combat this, or at least address it and tackle it in some way. Do you feel like as a police officer that you actually do like a significant job at addressing like the war on drugs or tackling like the cartel drug trafficking crisis?
I think the war on drugs is an awful terminology, just because
I agree.
I don't know. That verbiage just doesn't set well with me, because it's not like we're actually like fighting anything on a regular basis. We're just trying to combat an addiction problem, and I guess, I don't know, multiple organizations that are feeding into that addiction problem. But it's not a war by any means.
Okay, so in that case, like in terms of drug trafficking, do you feel like that the efforts of police, particularly in America, like are doing enough?
I think we do. I mean, so we have an impact. I don't know what, and I don't think it's a great impact, but there is an impact. And are we doing enough? I think that we're doing the best that we can. And I don't know what we could do better. But I think on a national stage, we have to do something to combat it better. I think that once you get into the United States, I think that we do a lot to, the criminal justice system at least puts fear in some people for, that are maybe afraid to use narcotics or maybe afraid to traffic them or sell them. I think on that level too, if we have people with addiction problems, instead of locking them up, I think that there should be some type of parallels where they're getting help, maybe some type of rehabilitation back into society, having job corps or something like that while they're going through this to combat the addiction problem.
Yeah.
But as far as like if you're selling narcotics and trafficking narcotics, I think jail is the proper place for you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a criminal breaking the law.
Yeah, no, I also feel like if we could give people a roadmap that don't see a roadmap of,
so that they avoid doing it in the first place,
yes,
or can change their path.
Yep, that like through society, like if we can show like, hey, this person grew up in your same neighborhood and this is what he did, and he became this wealthy businessman or works a 9-to-5 and has an amazing family or something along those lines. But if all you see is the criminal element around you, like you don't know how to get out of that. I feel like that's like a never-ending cycle in certain communities.
I agree. And I feel like, okay, when we have like these moral conversations about this, like no one is born a criminal, okay? And that's why, and some of you guys disagree, but I do have compassion for a lot of people who are in like the criminal world, just because I think that for a lot of people, they didn't feel like they had any other option. But then again, it gets to a point where you gotta change it up, and we can't be killing people. Have you arrested any drug traffickers in your career?
Yes.
And what was that like? Tell me about those exact cases, or like the one that stood out to you the most.
I mean, so there's some that I actually feel sympathy for, because some of them get roped into these situations where maybe they were addicts and then they didn't have the money to pay their drug dealer, and then what happens is like it's a never-ending cycle where now they are indebted to people for narcotics, and now they're trafficking in narcotics. Or there's people that fall in hard times, and these organizations know that. So you might have like a loose connection with someone, like a friend of a friend. Oh, my friend just lost his job, or he has cancer, or these types of things. And those, so now they're like, well, you can make $10,000 if you go do this, and it's 3-4 days of work. I mean, your moral compass might be right, but you're looking at it like, well, I have cancer, I don't know how to support my family, all these other things that are going on, and then those are the ones that I feel bad for. Yeah. And then there's ones that I've caught that have been doing it, and it's like a family business. And those I don't necessarily feel as bad for, just for the fact that it's not that there's a vulnerability there. You made a decision, and I know that was a family decision, I guess.
It's like the business.
Yeah, but it's a business. And you still know, your moral compass still at some point should be like, okay,
this is wrong.
I'm killing people with this narcotic, or this is wrong. So those ones I'm like, I have a little bit less sympathy for, but it's just an interesting world as a cop, and trying to be understanding and empathetic, but also having a job to do. You take an oath, then there might be some laws that I don't necessarily agree with, but I took an oath and I have to uphold those laws because that's what society says I have to do.
I think it's good that there's some stuff you don't agree with and you're not afraid to admit it. I think some people just like will blindly be like, yes, because I do this. Like even as a journalist, there's a lot of things that I'm like, but it's important to be critical. Like that's I think the key to actually upholding your integrity and your responsibility.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, good job. Okay, so we're on the highway right now. As you guys saw, like if you guys see the footage, there's a lot of rigs, truckers that drive through here. And one thing that Kenny and I have talked about before is how, first of all, like the whole trucking business, these rigs, a lot of it is run by predominantly like South Asian people and businesses, South Asian run businesses. This is also huge in Canada, and it's so interesting because when Kenny and I spoke the first time, we talked about how the South Asian population, or at least there's a large South Asian population within transnational organized crime, drug trafficking, that also have a lot of connections with the Mexican drug cartels. So when we're seeing these rigs here, like what are you looking for? What are your thoughts on this?
What I'm looking for in semis is, again, it's the human behavior aspect of it. If you're afraid of snakes and spiders and I throw one at you, you're not just going to let it crawl over you. If you have a bunch of drugs in your truck or car as you go by me, you're going to react to my presence. And that's all I'm doing, is looking for some type of deviation in your normal driving behavior that makes you stand out. Beyond that, like that's all I'm looking for. That's all it's going to separate you from every other car that's coming by.
How many of these rigs do you think semis have like drugs in them, and like why is, yeah?
I mean,
what are your thoughts here?
The odds. So I think as law enforcement as a whole, we probably stop 10% of everything, and that's from the border to interdiction guys to even local narcs. And so if you times that by 90%, that's probably a good odds of what is driving down your highways on a daily basis.
If you have a certain population that is running one major industry, which in this case we're talking about the semis, right? Like transportation of goods, and then also are highly involved in organized crime and drug trafficking. And those are two things that can go hand in hand together very well. I don't remember who it was, maybe it was you. Someone told me that they're using these companies, like certain criminals are telling a lot of these trucking companies, like, you have to run drugs for me and get paid. If not, they face retaliation in India. Was that you that said that?
I don't know if I've heard that. I don't know if I was the first one that said it. I know that's something that we have heard, where and I don't know if it's like, say, the first or the 10th time that this individual, say, was running narcotics, and then maybe he ran it a few times and then wanted to get out of the business, and then all of a sudden there was threats made back to another country, where their country of origin, or something along those lines. It's not necessarily where now, and this is the first time in the past couple of years that I've seen that of working interdiction, where typically we would see it maybe like Canada, the US, and Mexico. Now it just seems that the cartels have expanded to almost a worldwide operation where they can reach anyone that does them wrong or doesn't want to, I guess, play ball, no matter where their families are located.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so like if we look at this from an international standpoint, we've seen where if an organized crime group or triad that has connections to a different country, let's say there is a group, a gang operating in Canada or the US, and somebody wrongs someone or doesn't complete an operation, there's retaliation at the home country of origin of that person, or like their gang as a whole. So obviously that's a way to get away, escaping having to deal with Western law enforcement, US agencies, Canadian agencies, and be able to basically take out hits or commit violent acts in a country where there isn't much oversight. And if we look at India, we see that a lot of violent crimes, if you just look at crimes against women, go with zero justice. Like, there is absolutely no legal system affecting these people or targeting them.
As you know, on this show, we try to keep it as real as possible. I'm boots on the ground, on site right now on assignment. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Borderland Dispatches with yours truly, Katarina. I hope to continue the coverage of just how critical the United States highways and major routes from the US are being used by international organized crime groups to move their product and to ensure it gets on these very streets that I'm walking on today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and as always, see you next time.